Josh Anderson and you're watching Blind Squirrel DIY. Well, has a situation like this ever happened to you before? You're out miles away from home, try to start the car, won't start. Now a lot of times the first thing we think of is the battery, but in this case we know it wasn't the battery because all of the accessories turned on just fine. So I got to thinking it was probably the starter. I wasn't sure what to do, and so we had it towed home. The tow truck guy turned out to be a big help because he showed me how to get it started. And so if you're ever in this situation, here's how you can get it started. Now we still want to go ahead and replace the starter because obviously it's going bad, but he showed me how to start it, and so then you could get out of whatever situation you're in. Like I said, we were miles from home and it was much better to have the car at home. So here's what the tow truck guy showed me. He just pointed out real quickly where the starter is. It's that silver kind of cylindrical thing right there, and he just took a pry bar kind of like this. His is more like a screwdriver, and he just put it right there and he just tapped it with his hammer, and that's how I knew that it was the starter that was causing all this issues. And if you know how a solenoid works, I don't really want to try to explain it now, but it made sense that if you tap it, it would just come loose and start working. Alright, first thing we're going to do is just remove the battery and the battery plate and everything. This is mainly just to give you some room so you can get to the starter and the solenoid that are over here. If you just get all that out of your way, you have a lot more room. The nuts on these posts are close to 10 millimeter, but really you just need to loosen them. That's also a 10 millimeter. If you don't have ratcheting box end wrenches, man, dude. FYI, every time you take the battery off one of these Honda Pilots, it resets your whole ECM computer. Another retainer clip holding the negative wire down, and I think you just pinch the side of it. So these bolts that hold on the bottom of the battery compartment are actually turned out to be a lot more of a headache than you would imagine. They're only that long, and the only thing that's worked so far is a breaker bar. They're really tight. So that last bolt right back there in the corner, it's really hard to get to because the wires go and they cover over it. You just can't get enough leverage on it, and so luckily, I hope you got something like this. My breaker bar has a hole in the handle right there, so that way I can hold it straight up, and I ran a screwdriver through the hole, then I could get my torque this way, and that was finally enough to do it. I'm just gonna pop this one off. Our next step is to pull these hoses out of the way. Like, we could undo them, but that's a lot of work, and I saw another guy in another video just pull them back with a wire or something. So bungee cords work good to pull the hoses out of the way. I think they're a little gentler on your coolant hoses than maybe baling wire. Just trying to figure out where to hook the bungees so that they hold it out of your way is a little tricky, but that's how I did it right there. And I always think it's nice to look at here's the new starter and solenoid to see what we're getting at here. Basically the two things we have to take off is there's a plug here, and then this is where the positive battery wire goes, and then these two bolts there and there. You'll see this is 2006 Honda Pilot. This is the way the starter looks. Actually, a lot of other videos you'll find for similar vehicles, it looks a little different. Like even my Haynes manual, part about the starter is it actually looks different than the one we're putting in because this repair manual actually covers 2003 through 2008 and also Ridgelines and Acura MDX. So it's really kind of average of all these things. And so there's the positive, and there's that. I want to be kind of gentle with the wire because that part stayed in the car. I am working off three different sources here. One is the instructions that came with my new starter. One is like I showed you there, the Haynes manual. And then the last one is just YouTube. And the guy who shows the best one that I found, he's called Rick Does Stuff. So yeah, that does just slide off. And then the positive lead is covered by a boot. So you just want to slide that boot off. And there's a nut. Yeah, it's a 1/2 inch socket. And you can get it off with your fingers after you break it loose. Next you might take this dipstick out of the way. Also, if you don't have one of these telescopic highly recommend it. This is my extension. You need to run your extension in front of the solenoid. Here's the solenoid, and it's kind of back there behind the top of the solenoid. Don't get mixed up. There's another bolt over here. That's not it. It looks kind of like it would go on the flange there, but it doesn't. So here's the top bolt over here. It's the same size as the lower bolt. Okay, and so to make that top bolt come out real quick, I actually just used my drill, but I had to put this Bungee extension on there because it was kind of hard to loosen it with my finger. But now we've got the bolt out. Now we're just trying to be careful because there's a lot of gunk in there and I don't want any of that falling inside. In fact, I got my vacuum real quick. You suck! Wires that are kind of snapped on, like just bracketed on here. Other than that, we should be able to lift the starter out now. Positive wire comes up and is bracketed on that one, so we gotta get that off. It'd be nice to actually know the best way to do these brackets right there. I guess just stick a screwdriver in it and pry it. Okay, pry it out. There. Takes a little finagling, but you can do it. Okay, and there's our old starter solenoid. Pretty dirty. Okay, and there is a gasket that fits on this surface that's still down in there. And as you can tell in my old one, it's been getting dirty right there. It's like stuff has been getting under the gasket. So the tricky thing is we're going to try to clean all that down there and get that other gasket out and cleaned up because we want to keep it. Showing you the old versus the new. Obviously the old's on the right, and just see how dirty that thing is. Especially that gear down in there. I turned it like this and some junk fell out of there. So it's no wonder that one is kind of starting to quit working. Looking down in there where it seats on there, it's really dirty, and I really want to kind of wipe that, but I don't know how much I can do because I don't want to knock any more gunk into there. But I do want my new one to sit on there nice and tight and clean. I'm going to spray some engine degreaser on a cloth and just wipe around there first. So actually what I did is I stuffed a sock in there just to keep stuff from falling in that hole. I'm just going to spray engine degreaser around the outside of it. So here's the gasket right here, and so I'm going to have to hold it on the starter as I put the starter down in there. Just set it on top there. So we also have to get this harness right there under it.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
For freedom wherever there's trouble, G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe!
It's a Cobra attack! Get the G.I. Joe hovercraft! Get the new Joes aboard!
G.I. Joe hovercraft holds 9 Joes. It's the big new way to bring the Joe team into action. And it floats on water.
Release depth charges! Yo, Joe!
A real American
Chase that Cobra! Way to go, Joe!
G.I. Joe hovercraft comes with driver, other figures, and equipment sold separately from Hasbro.
It kind of pushes on these little pegs and it'll hold a little bit, so that might be just enough to get the starter down in there and seated. If we can just get our bolts threaded, we'll be good to go. The positive wire bracketed on there before we bolt anything. Always a good idea to reverse your steps in the same order. Really, I think if you just slide a little bracket over that middle ear, it should pop on there. Yeah, I heard it snap. I'm going to go ahead and loosen the nut, or take the nut off the positive terminal, set it aside. And I think those little pins on the surface, you should be able to feel them kind of snap. Jiggle stuff around, you can kind of feel it seat down on the face, and that's a nice feeling. Now we're going to take that lower bolt. Remember to thread it through that bracket first. Mine, it's like an orange wire connected to a bracket. Hardest part is you can't see that lower flange. You can't see your bolt hole. So about 10, 12 years ago I broke my neck, so it makes my hands really clumsy. Try to speed things up. I put my drill in there. Have to have a bendy ratchet extension. Saves you a lot of threading. Nice. I'd like to feel those without the drill. Okay, so we're going to torque those 2 bolts. Got my torque wrench set. My Haynes manual says the top bolt is 33 foot-pounds and the bottom bolt is 47 foot-pounds. Even though it's a different starter in the book, I'm going to go ahead and use that for this starter. Okay. Top one is set at 33 foot-pounds. Bottom one we're going to set to 47. Shorter extension. Okay. We're ready to put the terminals back on. So this one right here is your B terminal, or your starter wire. The starter cable I'm going to put on first. Okay. Put your nut back on there. Oh, shoot. You want to get that nice and tight so you have a good electrical connection. Okay, now slide the boot back over. Actually kind of important because that keeps all the moisture and junk out of there. Fits nice and snug. And the other one is the S terminal. That one just slides on this plug. I don't know if you can see right there, that plug sticking out. It just slides on. It's a tight fit. If I put that dipstick back in. Our starter is hooked up. Okay, now all we got to do is put everything back. First I'm going to undo all these bungee cables holding the hoses out of the way. And then next is the battery box. The battery box just has 4 bolts. And these hose clippy. That's back. Set the battery back in. This bracket back on over the top. Moment of truth. You have power? Sounds great.
Save money, learn stuff, do it yourself. Well, here we are again.